Did you know that at its height, the British Empire was the largest in history, and for more than a century, it was the largest global power? By 1922, it influenced a population of about 458 million people, a fifth of the world's population, and covered more than a quarter of the total land area of the Earth. But how did an island nation, smaller than the state of Colorado, come to rule an empire where the sun never set? From its humble beginnings in the misty islands of the North Atlantic, Britain grew to control vast lands on every continent. At its height, the empire's influence stretched from the dense jungles of Africa to the vast plains of North America, and from the bustling markets of India to the distant shores of Australia. This empire didn't just change the map of the world, it reshaped economies, cultures, and politics on a global scale. But what were the forces driving this unprecedented expansion? How did Britain, a relatively small nation, come to dominate the world stage? In this video, we'll dive deep into the history, battles, innovations, and personalities that led the British Empire to its position of global dominance. Britain, mainly England, Scotland, and Wales, was a relatively modest player on the European stage. A land of rolling hills, medieval castles, and turbulent political landscapes, it was a place where internal strife and external threats were the norm. Medieval England was often involved in internal power struggles, such as the Wars of the Roses, and external conflicts, particularly with its archrival, France. Despite its challenges, Britain, especially England, began to lay the groundwork for maritime exploration and trade. The Tudor period, beginning in the late 15th century, marked a turning point. It was an age of Renaissance and Reformation, where the arts and sciences flourished and England began to look beyond its shores. As we enter the Elizabethan era, named after Queen Elizabeth I, we witness the true dawn of the British Empire. Elizabeth's reign, beginning in 1558, brought a period of relative stability and prosperity. It was during this time that England set its sights on the wider world. The Queen, a shrewd and ambitious monarch, encouraged maritime exploration and trade, laying the foundations for what would become a great global empire. Key figures of this era, such as Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh, became symbols of England's growing sea power and thirst for exploration. Drake's circumnavigation of the globe, a feat sponsored by Elizabeth herself, not only brought wealth, but also sent a clear message to the world. Britain was a rising naval power, one poised to challenge the dominance of Spain and Portugal in the New World and beyond. This era laid the essential foundations for the expansion to come. Naval prowess, supported by royal patronage and fueled by a mixture of economic ambition and national pride, set England on a path that would eventually lead to the formation of the British Empire. But this was only the beginning, as Britain's appetite for expansion and influence was just beginning to grow. With the dawn of the Age of Exploration, Britain began to carve its path on the global stage. This era, fueled by curiosity, ambition, and the pursuit of wealth, saw British explorers pushing the boundaries of the known world. Men like Sir Francis Drake and Captain James Cook became household names, symbols of Britain's expanding horizons. Sir Francis Drake, already renowned for his circumnavigation of the globe, played a pivotal role in challenging Spanish supremacy on the seas. His exploits not only boosted English morale, but also filled the treasury with Spanish gold, fueling further expeditions. Drake's legacy was one of daring and defiance, qualities that would come to define Britain's maritime spirit. On the other hand, Captain James Cook's voyages in the Pacific were groundbreaking. His expeditions went further than any European had before, mapping uncharted territories and making first contact with indigenous populations. Cook's journeys were not just about exploration, they were scientific and anthropological missions, expanding the European understanding of the world. As explorers ventured forth, the establishment of colonies became a central theme of Britain's expansion. In the Americas, British colonies were established along the East Coast, each becoming a new outpost for trade and a foothold in the New World. In Africa and Asia, Britain's presence grew more through trade than settlement, with ports and trading posts becoming nodes in a growing commercial network. The impact of these new trade routes was immense. The spice trade, originating in the East Indies, was particularly lucrative. Spices like pepper, cloves, and nutmeg, once rare and expensive in Europe, became more accessible, altering cuisines and economies. Textiles too played a significant role. The fine fabrics of India, for instance, were highly sought after, and the trade in cotton and silk helped fuel the empire's expansion. These early steps in exploration and colonization laid the groundwork for what would become a vast empire. The wealth generated from these ventures flowed back to Britain, driving further exploration and expansion. The British Empire was starting to take shape, driven by a combination of exploration, trade, and an unyielding desire to reach the far corners of the world. As the calendar turned to the 18th and 19th centuries, Britain was on the cusp of unprecedented change. The Industrial Revolution, beginning in the late 18th century, transformed Britain into the world's first industrialized country. This era of technological innovation and industrial growth catapulted Britain to new heights of economic and military power. The revolution was not just about steam and iron, it revolutionized Britain's capacity to produce goods, project power, and extend its global influence. The British Navy, now powered by steam and iron, ruled the waves, ensuring the security of trade routes and colonial possessions. This period was marked by key conflicts and strategic acquisitions. The 7 Years' War, fought between 1756 and 1763, pitted Britain against France and Spain, reshaping the global order. Britain emerged victorious, gaining control of vast territories in North America and India. The colonization of India, a jewel in the crown of the British Empire, was a major chapter. First through trade and later through military and political power, Britain established control over this vast and diverse land. The British East India Company, a powerful trading corporation, played a central role in this colonization. It was an unusual entity, a private company endowed with powers of war and governance. Meanwhile, Africa became a new frontier in the imperial race. During the scramble for Africa, the European powers, with Britain at the helm, carved out the continent with little regard for the indigenous populations. Thus, the 18th and 19th centuries were a period of dramatic growth for the British Empire, driven by industrial might, naval supremacy, and a relentless pursuit of trade and territory. Britain had become the preeminent global power. The British Empire was at its zenith. But this was not without cost or controversy. Both at home and in the colonies, as the British Empire grew, it wasn't just the spirit of adventure or the pursuit of new lands that drove its expansion. There was also a series of calculated economic and political strategies. One key strategy was the establishment of trade monopolies. The British Crown, realizing the immense profit potential of overseas trade, granted exclusive rights to companies like the British East India Company. This company and others like it became the economic engines of the empire, controlling vast resources and trade networks across Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Alongside these monopolies, the Navigation Acts played a crucial role. Passed by the English Parliament in the mid-17th century, these laws restricted the use of foreign ships for trade between every country except Britain. This not only boosted the development of British merchant fleets, but also ensured that the wealth generated by the colonies benefited Britain directly. The acts were a double-edged sword, spurring economic growth at home while creating tensions with the colonies. Tensions that would eventually lead to conflicts like the American Revolutionary War. Diplomacy and alliances were another cornerstone of Britain's global dominance. Throughout its history, Britain proved adept at playing the complex game of European politics. It formed and at times broke alliances to maintain the balance of power in Europe. This diplomatic dexterity allowed Britain to focus on its overseas interests without facing significant opposition from other European powers. Amidst all this, a saying began to resonate. The sun never sets on the British Empire. It was a phrase that captured the sheer vastness of British dominions, ensuring that at any given moment, the sun was shining on at least one of its territories. This wasn't just a poetic expression, it was a reality that underscored Britain's unparalleled global presence. This blend of economic savvy, legislative control, diplomatic maneuvering, and a relentless drive for expansion laid the foundations for an empire that would leave an indelible mark on world history. But, as we shall see, this very expansion would also sow the seeds of the empire's eventual decline. As the British Empire expanded its reach, it left an indelible mark on cultures and societies around the globe. One of the most important legacies of the empire was the spread of the English language. From North America to the Indian subcontinent, from the Caribbean islands to the Australian continent, English became the primary language, facilitating trade, administration, and communication. This linguistic heritage continues today, influencing global business, science, and diplomacy. But the impact of British rule went far beyond language. British cultural practices, legal systems, and administrative styles were imposed or adopted in various forms across the colonies. Cricket in the West Indies, parliamentary systems in Australia and Canada, and English gardens in India are just a few examples of British cultural footprints. However, the effects of British rule on local populations and cultures were often far-reaching and complex. In many cases, traditional social structures were disrupted, local economies were reoriented to serve imperial needs, and new class systems emerged. This often led to significant social changes, some of which were deeply resented by the local population. Resistance and rebellions against British rule were a recurring theme throughout the history of the empire. From the American Revolution in the 18th century to the Indian Revolt of 1857 and numerous uprisings in Africa, local populations often rose against British authority. These movements were not only wars of independence, they were also struggles to preserve cultural identities, local traditions, and political autonomy. Every act of resistance, every struggle for independence tells a story of resilience and the desire for self-determination. The legacy of these conflicts is complex, leaving a mixed legacy of pride, trauma, and transformation in the former colonies. But empires, however powerful, are not immune to the tides of change. The 20th century, with its global conflicts and changing ideologies, marked the beginning of the end for the British Empire. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 was the first major shockwave. Britain, relying on its vast empire, played a key role in the war. However, the cost was astronomical, both in human life and in economic terms. The war left Britain weakened, its treasury drained, and its population weary of war. The interwar period was a time of reflection and recovery, but soon World War II swept the world again. The empire mobilized, and again the cost was great. Despite playing a key role in the Allied victory, Britain emerged from the war exhausted and deeply in debt, and its status as a world power severely diminished. These two global conflicts not only drained Britain's resources but also sparked a shift in global attitudes towards imperialism and self-determination. On the eve of World War II, a wave of decolonization swept the empire. Countries from India to African nations began to demand independence, a call that Britain was increasingly unable to resist. The period from 1947, beginning with the independence of India and Pakistan, saw a rapid disintegration of the empire. By the 1960s, most of Britain's colonies had gained their independence, signaling the end of the British Empire as a colonial power. However, the legacy of the empire would not disappear. In its place came the Commonwealth of Nations. This political association, composed mainly of former British colonies, represented a new era of cooperative relations based on shared history, culture, and values. The Commonwealth, embodying a spirit of international partnership, stands as a testament to Britain's transformed role in a post-imperial world. The history of the British Empire is one of rise and fall, conquest and surrender. Its influence, positive and negative, continues to be felt across the globe. From a small island nation, Britain rose to control a quarter of the world's land and people, shaping global politics, trade, and cultures. The empire's reach expanded far and wide, fueled by ambition, innovation, and an unquenchable thirst for expansion. However, nothing is eternal in this world. Its decline, accelerated by the devastating impact of two world wars and the unstoppable force of decolonization movements, led to the formation of the modern Commonwealth. Today, the legacy of the British Empire is visible in the shared histories, languages, and institutions of countries around the globe. The history of the British Empire, with its triumphs and tragedies, offers invaluable lessons about the dynamics of power, the importance of cultural understanding, and the inevitable tides of change. Do you like it? Kindly give your valuable response in our comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting and informative